You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Word of Mouth podcast. My name is Neal, and I'm happy to be your host again on this wonderful episode that we have. Our guest today is Barbara Powers-Harris, and Barb has a truly illuminating life story for us today, just very rich tale about her experience of life. There has been such a vast array of experiences that Barb has experienced in her life, and I'm just so much looking forward to her sharing her story with you all today. And I'll just remind all our listeners tuning in today, we thank you again so much for your faithfulness to our podcast and our program. We are very grateful for you listening and sharing with your friends, so please like and share any of the episodes with your friends that you find helpful in your own faith journey. Just want to remind you that we can be accessed on WCAT Radio, which is an internet radio service that you can find online. And then also we have a podcast that is available on Spreaker.com. So if you just go to Spreaker.com and then in the search bar you type Word of Mouth, there will be a couple options if you search that route. Just search for the one, though, that has the heading Society and Culture. So that would be the one that I host and have a guest every month. So just, a reminder, you can access us on WCAT Radio or Spreaker.com. Again, the title of the podcast is Word of Mouth, and we're so blessed to be able to share stories of disciples of the Lord just with you every month. And so as I begin today, just again, I'm happy to introduce Barb to you all, and so I'm just going to read a brief introduction. She'll cover much more in the interview, but Barb describes herself as a lifelong teacher. She sees teaching as sharing what she knows, understands, and values. Thus, everyone can be a student and everyone a teacher. Special projects that Barb has undertaken recently include writing The Promise, which is the moving story of a family in the Holocaust, for Penguin Books UK, and survivor and humanitarian Ava Schloss. So this is a book about a survivor of the Holocaust. Also, other projects that Barb has undertaken have been creating and exhibiting Heaven's Gate, which is a portrait tribute to children in the Holocaust. She's also creating and exhibiting Heaven's Rosarium, which is a 15-foot rosary composed of miniature portraits of our Blessed Mother and miniature poems called lanterns. I think I'm saying that right. She'll correct me in a second if that's not correct. Based on Marian prayers, the Hail Mary, the Memorare, the Hail Holy Queen, and the Regina Caeli. And then most notably, and most recently, that we'll share this at the end of the episode as well, she has assembled what is called a New and Glorious Morn that you can access on YouTube. And she has collaborated with her daughter, Clara, who is the vocalist in this video, and her son, Neal, who is the producer of this. Again, it's called A New and Glorious Morn. And there's a quote here: "We were excited to create a video montage of portraits, prayers, and music for Mary that can be shared easily." Okay? And so sharing this particular video online is what has connected Barb to me. As I came across this video at the recommendation of a friend. Again, it's called A New and Glorious Morn. Currently, Barb's ministry involves outreach to Catholics around the globe. She shares her personal story and tribute to our Blessed Mother so that others might be strengthened, comforted, and uplifted on their journey of faith. And so from the introduction, you can tell that Barb is an extraordinary woman, and I'm looking forward to this interview. And so, Barb, thank you so much for joining me today. How have you been over these crazy COVID months?
Oh, thank you kindly, Michael. Just fine. Counting blessings. I do have a sister in the hospital, but there's always a reason to keep praying and keep working together. But we count our blessings, and that always carries us through.
Amen. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for being with me today. And we'll just dive right in here as we begin this opening segment. We always like to talk to the guest about just significant moments in your faith journey and encounters with the Lord. So we certainly want to get to that in just a moment, but do you have any background information, Barb, other than the wonderful introduction that you provided me with? Is there anything about your background that you would like our listeners to know before we kind of dive into the more substantial elements today?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I do think our frame of reference has something to do with where we are in our lives, and we realize over time that much of what we have to work with and to share came from many other people, most especially from our parents and their parents. And I'm the second of 11 children, a German Catholic family, very large family. My parents were from large families, and my siblings and I were born in 13 years. So we were very tight-knit. Mom was very organized. What went for one went for all. But Dad would tell us things like we were his best insurance policy because he knew we'd take care of each other. And, in fact, he and my mom, who are both in heaven, are seeing just that as life plays out. There's many times when we need to call on each other, even though we live in 9 different states. So we're pretty spread out. I am married to a wonderful man of spirit. His name is Michael. He works as a cloud computing business analyst, and very intuitive, a wonderful Christian, who says we operate on a different frequency. His marriage to me is his first marriage. This is my second marriage. He did not have any children of his own, but he has shared insights that I have searched for, and you'll find out as I share my story why I've needed to search for this understanding. And I say, how do you know what I have looked so fervently for? And he said, it's my love for you that speaks to me. And so this has certainly been a blessing to both of us, and it's definitely part of my ability to share with others. I'm a mother of 4 sons and 1 daughter, and a Grammy to 3 grandchildren. So what a joy that is. They're all innovative thinkers and explorers, every last one of them, and they also love learning, and they love sharing what they learn, even at a very young age. So I think that captures my background.
Sure, that's a lot. That's
in
awesome.
a nutshell.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, and so as we look kind of into your background, where you're coming from, I guess the next transition would be into kind of early faith experiences in your life. So anything that's kind of molded you and shaped you in your faith journey as you've been a disciple of the Lord.
Absolutely. That becomes more evident as time goes on. My dad's oldest brother, Father Gordon Cray, Brown Franciscan, Uncle Gordy, when he came to visit us from out of town, he would say Mass on the coffee table in the living room. And boy, I didn't know anybody else that had that experience, and that was just such a wonderful thing to look back on. And it made the liturgy feel like a meal, which in fact it is. And the prayers and his sermon were just like a conversation. It's just a wonderful way to experience the liturgy and our sacraments, and I am so appreciative of that. My parents led the prayer of St. Francis every single day. My dad went to St. Bonaventure University. He named many of my brothers after Franciscan priests there, and this became our norm. It really was our norm. It's the way we lived. He'd bring it up where there's injury pardon, and we weren't all happy to be reminded, that we had to keep being nice to each other or whatever, but where there's stout faith, we kept coming back to this foundation. Dad also prayed novenas. He led us in the rosary during Lent as a family, a lot, not all the time, but I certainly remember that. experience. And I remember in the summers him telling us we should go to weekly Mass. We were the only kids there. And but, of course, we did. And again, those are very special memories because they spoke loud and clear what was important. In high school, I went to an all-girls high school called Villa Angela Academy in Cleveland. I grew up in both in Cleveland and New Jersey, but we were in Cleveland then. And the Ursuline Sisters, a teaching order, gave us some wonderful experiences that also mirrored my experience at John Carroll, which is a Jesuit university. And that really involved encouraging us students to ask questions and ponder our faith and our vocation. So while we're learning, we were process. What did this have to do with us? And what did we have to contribute to what we were learning in terms of our thought and also in terms of our spirit and our conscience? And I realized through that all Catholics, including me, have a voice and have a role in the church. So that was big.
Sure. No, that's very true. That's huge. Yeah. We're just talking with a friend yesterday about that, as a matter of fact, about the need for everyone to live a devoted life to Christ in their own state. So, yeah, it's definitely the new evangelization. It's the call that we have. So, and I'm glad that you were introduced to that at a very young age, and praise God that I was too, just that idea of a personal mission and a personal role that we have as disciples. The next thing, Barb, as you kind of grew up and obviously experienced this significant moment in high school, other faith turning points. I know that we talked kind of in the initial conversation we had just about some powerful experiences that you've had that have really shaped your faith. So if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about some faith turning points that you've encountered.
Absolutely. Well, I did have a very, very specific faith turning point, and after we clarified it as that, I thought, well, maybe more accurately, I should call this a leap of faith. And a major leap of faith, because my faith didn't really change, and that was a blessing. That it was in harmony with this new way of seeing things, but it grew exponentially, and that was triggered by when my third son Bobby was taken to heaven, and he had a sudden severe respiratory illness. He stopped breathing when I was holding him. It came out of the blue, healthy baby. He was 21 months old, and they could never really explain what happened. And 2 months later, my dad left the world. And so they say when your child leaves the world, you've lost your future, or certainly your future has changed. When a parent leaves, your past has changed. And so I was thrown into it was quite a whirlwind. And I would say for the rest of your life, you integrate that experience. But I'm surprised when we talk about it. Well, I'm not surprised. I see when we talk about it how God works through our suffering. And the first thing that I recognized, and this was really quite early on, was that my prayers became bigger than words. I mean, I just couldn't find words for. And it was, what were my intentions? What were my actions? That became a prayer. I just knew it was a prayer because our God was big enough to meet me where I was at. Another thing I recognized, and this I thought was gradual, but in fact, looking back, it really was a sudden realization, and that was that the magnitude of my grief reflected the magnitude of my love. And I remember very specifically being on the floor sobbing, wondering how I was ever going to stand back up. And it was like a light, just popped into my head. And that light was, this is all because of love. That's why you are here. And that of course, eventually can carry you forward. But that was really very powerful. And then, I realized over time that what I was actually grieving for, what was actually gone, was the tangibles, the chance to see my son, to hear him, to touch him. Yes, very, very, you long for this. But in the recognition that these were our tangible connections, the intangible connection became more real. And that was very, again, very powerful, because it propelled me into the realm of spirit, to focus on my own spirit. I found comfort in unexpected places, and I will say hope was hard to find, but hope found me in unimaginable ways. And does God send signs? Are there miracles? Well, there's something that happens that's greater than our understanding, that we're like a bridge to heaven. And one of the words I would give to this for myself, for this experience, is wonder. And it came not just from me. My 5-year-old son, who is my oldest child, he was 5 when Bobby left the world. The first thing he said was, "Why don't they just bury us with him?" Now, that talked to me, if that didn't speak to the depth of his experience, I don't know what else would. But not a long time later, he was still 5 years old. He came to me one day and he said, Mom, God holds everything with one finger, but Jesus uses 2 hands. And I'm like, whoa, I don't have the story of creation, Michelangelo's creation on the ceiling of his bedroom. No, in fact, I do not have that there. And he hasn't been to theology class. I mean, it's just, wow. And then my daughter was born a year later after Bobby left, and she sang more than she talked. I have 10 brothers and sisters. I never met anybody that did that. And somebody gave us a piano when she was 5. She could just go to the piano and play all this stuff. Bottom line, music. Her gift of music healed my heart in so many ways. How could God know that was exactly what we needed, this unspoken, unasked for, undeserved gift, channeled through Clara? And then I got to the point in my prayer life where I thought, I struggled to try and understand what this all meant, and I was reading everything I could get my hands on that had to do with eternity and spirituality, all the saints, right? St. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, Teresa of Lisieux, Thomas Aquinas, and then and some popular authors at the time, Henry Nouwen and Thomas Merton, and Peter Kraft, by the way, my favorite author, who I'll reference later. But anyways, I finally kind of gave up and said, okay, I am going to just focus on thankfulness. That's it. If I only have 2 more years to live myself, I don't want to look back and say that I didn't appreciate what I had. So I'm just going to be thankful. And then what do you know? My last son was born on Thanksgiving Day. I mean, I just joy. God keeps breaking through. So I really began to appreciate the realm of mystery. God's ways are far greater than ours. That became a comfort. And when my suffering really, the days that it takes center stage, because I'm here to tell you, it's almost 33 years that have passed since Bobby left. And I can be overcome with missing him. And when I struggle with the way my life appears, my husband will say, make the picture bigger. And then if I do, it's not just about that absence. It's about all God's promises, all that he said he would restore, all that he provides that is needed to fulfill his purpose for us in the world, that he's prepared a place for us in his kingdom. And so then I'm looking forward, not backward. It shifts my focus, and I can realize gifts, unexplainable gifts, and listen, put things in God's hands.
Michael Horn. Hey, Barb.
Yes.
Okay. Did you get cut off at some point, or what happened?
I do not know. I don't know what happened, and I kept talking, and I don't know. Okay, so I have no idea, but my phone shut off, and okay. All right, I apologize to anybody for the inconvenience of this. We'll hopefully get this fixed before the final recording's released, so I apologize. Barb was talking about her experiences here and the faith turning points of her life, and especially the loss of her son, Bobby, at a very, very young age, and just talking about her prayers became bigger than words, and I think that's where we picked up, and that's when my phone cut out, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, well, I'm happy to revisit, and thank you. So, these things happen, right? Right. So another, actually kind of like a sudden realization was that the magnitude of my grief really reflected the magnitude of my love. And that became evident when I was on the floor sobbing, and I did not know how I was going to stand back up. And it was like a light came on in my head that said, this is because of love. That's where this came from, and that eventually carried me forward, because I knew that ability to love is a gift from God. And as I recognized, as the days passed, what was gone, as I thought about what was gone, the opportunity to see and hear and touch my young son, I realized that those are, I'm going to say, just the tangibles. This is something very big to give up, but it's in the recognition of these being our tangible connections, the intangibles became more real, our togetherness in spirit. And it propelled my spirit forward to realize that. I found comfort in unexpected places and in unimaginable occurrences that I didn't necessarily generate. Like, I think they're like signs. Sometimes we call them miracles. For me, this was a bridge to heaven. And the kind of word I would give this experience, my faith experience, is wonder. My 5-year-old son, my oldest son, he was 5 when Bobby left the world, and his comment was, why don't they just bury us with him? And I knew then how deep his loss and his feeling was for his brother. And not a long time later, he came to me one day and said, Mom, God holds everything with one finger, but Jesus uses 2 hands. And I just was struck by those profound words from my young child out of the mouths of babes, as if I had the Michelangelo's creation painted on the ceiling of his bedroom. God reaches us in unimaginable ways, and what a joy. My daughter was born a year after Bobby left, and she sang more than she talked. As a child, I have 10 brothers and sisters. Nobody else ever did that. None of my sons did. It was clearly her gift. And then somebody gave us a piano, and she could just go play on the piano what she just sang. And bottom line is, we had music. We constantly had music in our home. And to me personally, that's probably one of the most healing gifts that I could ask for. And I I just know that couldn't be a coincidence. I got to the point after spending a lot of time reading everything I could get my hands on that had to do with spirituality and eternity. At the time, this led me to stories of the saints, St. John of the Cross, St. Thomas Aquinas, Ignatius, Teresa of Lisieux, Teresa of Avila, other writers, Thomas Merton, Henry Nouwen, Peter Kreeft, who is my favorite author, and I'll mention later. I finally realized that I just was never going to get down to the bottom of everything. I just had such a desire to understand how this could be okay with God, to have a young child not be able to grow up and become, become who he is, or so it seemed. I finally decided to focus my prayer life on thankfulness. And months later, my youngest son was born on Thanksgiving Day. And I just thought, what are the chances? Wasn't that a joyful experience? I began to appreciate the realm of mystery, that God's ways are far greater than ours, and to just keep my eyes open. And I have to say, even today, 33 years later after this happened, when my suffering takes center stage and I'm struggling with the way my life appears, my husband says, make the picture bigger. And then I look forward, not backward. I shift my focus, and bigger includes eternity, bigger includes heaven, bigger includes God's promises to restore all that is lost, to provide all that's needed to fulfill our purpose in the world and prepare a place for us in his kingdom. So, yeah, it's a blessing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So moving forward, again, there's even more, which I love. It continues to get richer, this story. Can you talk, I guess, next, Barbara, a little bit about, as we continue through your faith journey, just you mentioned kind of this idea of surrendering to God. And, I mean, especially with what you had experienced, you could see how this moment of surrender would be a result of, like you mentioned, how your prayers became beyond words. You had this connection spiritually with your son. You realized just the wonder around you still in the midst of all the suffering and hardship. And so can you talk to us next a little bit about that surrendering?
Absolutely. Yes, I call it faith surrender because I experienced utter helplessness, total helplessness. My second son, Gordy, joined Bobby in heaven when he was 25. He was studying out of state. He had a hereditary illness, which we knew about, but it became critical, and we didn't know, and he didn't know. And I, as a mother, prayed daily and fervently for the wisdom and knowledge to take care of my children, to provide what they needed, and no forewarning. And honestly, I always questioned the same thing about Bobby. How did I not know that this respiratory cold was critical? Were my prayers the wrong prayers? I really struggled with that, but I felt like, well, God wouldn't allow this to happen twice, but in fact it did. And in my helplessness, I just said, that's it. I just have to hand it all over. Okay, God, I don't know how many more years I have left. I'm here to do my job, to fulfill my purpose, and then I get to go home too. And so I just surrendered. I won't say that I do completely, but because it's a process. But I put my loved ones and myself in God's hands, and I do feel in many ways detached from the world. I do feel like, how can I care about my basement then flooded when I don't have a basement, but I don't have my son here. So I pretty naturally detached from the world. And I find over time that life just doesn't hold value in the same way except through him, that I am so conscious of how fleeting our time is, and nothing else makes sense but to listen to God. And I'm saying that all in general. I'm not saying that I'm perfect about it, but that is definitely at the center of our decisions. And I did say many rosaries. I prayed many rosaries throughout the years. The Memorare, when I needed reassurance, boy, I can tell you, never was it known that anyone who fled to your protection, implored your help, or sought your intercession was left unaided. I reminded Mary that these were the words we counted on. But it's like I realize I'm not in the lead here. I'm not in charge. And my prayer journey led to a greater love and appreciation for our Blessed Mother, because I'm a mother. And if you can relate to my exact experience. And Mary is not just our mother. She's the Lady of Mercy. She's the Queen of Peace. She's comforter of the afflicted. She's the gate of heaven. And those titles, and there's many, many more, come from so many people's experience of her love. So that was a real gift, and that's what led to my mission and my goal, my vocation, which is what we're going to talk about next.
Yeah. I just want to follow up one more point just to kind of emphasize here, because I think you really hit just a good essential point in our lives, just relating our sorrows and sufferings to the Blessed Mother, because obviously Christ himself, his suffering was very intense, but we also have to remember too the seven sorrows of Mary and the extraordinary suffering and pain and sorrow that she experienced too, because she was so united to the Lord. And I think that's so powerful, like you mentioned, in this act of surrendering your faith, of kind of finding this devotion to the Blessed Mother, and how it ultimately led to your vocation and your mission and your purpose. And that idea, I think it's so important for people to understand today, because especially a lot of people that are not Catholic don't understand sometimes our relationship with Mary. But there's no one that's closer to our Lord than Mary. And by imitating her, like you said, we can just have so many fruits and so many gifts given to us by the Lord through imitation of her and that surrender that she gave to. So I think that's extremely vital for us to remember. And so, like you said, we're going to go next. We've transitioned to your mission, goal, and vocation. So there's a lot of material here too as well. Just so you just want to feel free to talk about any of these, either your mission, goal, vocation, purposes. I know there's a lot going on here.
For sure. Well, I'll start with mission. Honestly, it comes from that prayer of St. Francis. It's in giving that we receive, because my parents, you spend 18, 20 years living in that home that they so lovingly created for us. They lived simply their faith day to day, and through chronic illness, financial burden, countless trials you can imagine with 11 children, they willingly sacrificed. I mean, it wasn't easy, but they kept choosing to do the same thing, and they prayed always. And they always gave thanks. And they told the family stories. They told about Grandma Cray and how she sacrificed and how she suffered. And one theme bubbled to the top often, and my dad probably said this too, how little things make a big difference. And so mission, again, that was behind it. my goal, what did God want me to accomplish? You know, they always ask you in high school and college, what are you going to do? Well, I knew I wanted to continue the family stories, the family traditions, the family love. I wanted to have a family too. So I married in 1978. My 5 children were born in the 80s. So busy years. And I was also in education. I was teaching. As you had mentioned, I was one of these born teachers that just loved to share what I knew and what I had learned. And so I did teach in the classroom. I had many roles in education, in schools, and a Fulbright research in Poland and Russia. But what was at the heart of it, the overarching goal was to help others to discover and develop their talents and abilities. So, I used that word vocation. Loved the word vocation. What calls to you? I would always ask them. Sure. Forget about all the assessments. What is pulling at your heart? What can you not wait to do? So there's that word, vocation, right? But what I realized over time was that is not just a job or a role or a label. That is day-to-day, moment-to-moment. What does God want me to do today with these resources, this health or whatever, these limitations, this ability? And so I really, moment by moment, I can even say, okay, I got 30 minutes. What am I supposed to be doing with this? And of course, I asked this question in light of my life experience. When Bobby and Gordy were taken to heaven, I didn't ask why me or why my sons, because I was aware of suffering in the world. I know that suffering's a universal condition of humanity. I know I'm not the only one. And I know through history that many people's lives were seemingly cut short. And so what that did was kind of shifted the table and made me think about my own life as a gift. I'm still here, so what am I supposed to do about it? What am I supposed to share? Because in a large family, you do ultimately realize that the value of what we have is in the sharing. I mean, we were forced to share. We didn't have a choice, and we didn't all look so happy about it. But my mom used to say, you kids don't know how lucky you are, how good you've got it. And we have definitely found that out in spades as adults. I never thought I'd say we're spoiled, but we were spoiled because we shared everything. Mary spoke to me in some very powerful ways. First of all, she always said yes, and to God's call to her, God's call in her life. And when yes didn't make sense, clearly didn't make sense, she still said yes. And as you mentioned, she bore many sorrows, but she kept choosing love in the face of danger, fear, suffering. Talk about injustice, talk about danger. Incomprehensible in today's world. And she showed me a love that's stronger than death. And death, becomes like the enemy. It's death that robbed my family of happiness, or seemed to, right? So I really believed over time that I was being called to work on a tribute to our Blessed Mother. And I had studied art in school. Actually, that was one of my college majors. And my favorite topic in art was portraits, and my favorite medium was pencil. And yes, I'd done some pencil portraits through the years, but not a whole lot. You're busy with raising your family and teaching. But Michael and I decided now's the time. And I stopped doing everything else and said, every day, this is the kids were raised. And so, life was simpler then. But I dedicated a block of time and said, every day I'm going to get up and I'm going to work on portraits of our Blessed Mother. And so I created them on wooden discs They're 1.5 inches in diameter. I don't know how I chose it, but, that's how things evolve. You just, well, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. I did like miniatures because they you have to be up close to them, and so it's kind of an intimate connection with what you're working on and looking at. Took me about 3 hours to complete one, but in that time I reflected on the words of our Catholic prayers because of exactly what I said before. As Catholics, different than some, many Christians, Christians, I'll say in general, we have many prayers that are kind of, provided for us, and we've memorized all of them, and, but after you say like 1,000 Hail Marys or 1,000,000 Hail Marys, you're going to ask, what, how could are these words connecting with how I'm praying right now? How can I relate? So that's what the lanterns are. The lantern is the correct word. It is a short form poem because I was creating miniature portraits. I thought I might as well do miniature poems. And so every phrase, like Hail Mary's one phrase, full of grace, that's the next phrase. I wrote a miniature poem about that, and it's shaped like a lantern. So it's 1 syllable, 2 syllables, 3, 4, and 1. And you would see that in my exhibit, Heaven's Rosarium, the Rosary. Anyways, just to jump ahead, the Hail Mary, the Memorare, Hail Holy Queen, Regina Caeli, beautiful prayers. And when they start to have personal meaning, they just expand. And then to take that, and in addition to focusing on the many faces of our Blessed Mother, was just a very powerful experience, and my own a very prayerful experience. I needed to not think about making a beautiful portrait. What I needed to do was to find Mary in the wood. That was my orientation, and what happened was it reminded me of the many ways that God blesses all mothers with the capacity to love. Because we, as a mother, and if anybody that's a parent finds out, like, well, I never thought I could be that patient or that tolerant or that forgiving, or I would never thought I'd find myself in that experience. But in fact, that love that we have for our children and for each other, God's the one that makes that possible. And I became aware of how my love for Bobby and Gordy, my sons in heaven, continues. Even if they didn't get to grow into adulthood, I didn't lose them. I still have 5 children. I just 2 of them are gone before me. And I remember one year, it was Gordy's Glory Day. I call the day they were left the world their Glory Day, the day they were born in heaven. And I was weeping away, and Michael said, they're still here. They're still here. And I said, yes, I know. We've said it 1,000,000 times. And then he said, they're here in the most real way. And I realized that our connection, our togetherness in spirit is where it's at. And my mom in heaven and my dad in heaven, I'm still connected. They're still present to me. My love for them, their love for me is still growing in the world and where I'm at and where they're at. So what a joyful thing to realize. And it really then falls on me to keep my spirit in the lead. And so that is a part of how I know what to do next. I find when I follow God's call, the work and the blessings flow like a river. And in 2016, I created Heaven's Rosarium, the 15-foot rosary, and 53 poems about the prayers. And then, as you had mentioned, in 2017, Neal helped me produce A New and Glorious Morn, the video montage, because that's a whole lot easier to share than an actual rosary that's sitting in a suitcase. And then Clara, with her wonderful voice, saying, "Oh, Holy Night." And, some people say, why a Christmas tune? I'm one of these people that thinks you can celebrate Christmas every day. And if I focus on the lyrics, if we all focus on the lyrics for "Oh, Holy Night," it's really about celebrating the coming, the presence of our Savior, and how we need our Savior every day. Because the lyrics, "A weary world in sin and error pining," wow, is that obvious? The thrill of hope, yes, we need hope, and we need a Savior, and fall on your knees, absolutely, and what will you see? A new and glorious morn. And so I'm so thrilled to share that, and this opportunity to tell the story around that is why evangelization matters.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Amen.
it was a blessing to me, can be a blessing to someone else.
Right. And I just want to say thank you before we transition to this final segment here, Barb, because I think there's so many, like I said, there's so many rich points that you make, but I love this one too. Just about your understanding of vocation. It's so unique and special. Because I believe, obviously we look at the words like vocation in evangelization, and people, there's a dictionary definition, but there's so much meaning around the term. And what you talk about vocation, I think is so much like Mary, and obviously that has influenced how you work as a result of that, and just understanding, like you said, how is God inviting me to follow him right now. So like in this particular moment of my life, like you mentioned earlier, we don't know how much time we have here, but I have this time right now. And what is God asking and inviting me to do with this time that's been gifted to me right now? And I think that is so powerful for us to understand, because I think you mentioned earlier just a little bit about looking at our society, and sometimes there can be some distractions, and it's just, I think we distract ourselves even so much, and we waste so much time just with things that don't mean anything at all. And like you said, just to change that approach to, I have 10 minutes right now. Should I scroll through my phone, or should I actually just say, maybe I can help somebody right now in this room? Like maybe there's somebody that I can talk to right now and actually make a difference in their day and in their life. So I think that understanding of vocation is so important, and I value that very much. So thank you. Okay, so this final segment that we have here about evangelization, kind of your understanding of that term and what it means to evangelize in the world today in 2020, and then also just why is it so important for us. So those are the last questions I have for you. Just if you could share some of your thoughts on evangelization, and then why do you think it's so important for us today?
Oh, for sure. Thank you. Well, I totally agree with you. It's not just what we do, because there are a lot of mundane things we have to do. I got to go mow the grass and whatever else. But I think it's the way we do. Also, very much the way we do what we do, and the way we do wherever we're at, because there's limitations to where we're at. We have to take the dog to the vet or whatever it is. But you hit the nail on the head. I think we all know this. The world is cluttered with information that can desensitize the spirit and can distract our choices. It can rob us of precious time and the time for what matters most. What matters most, loving one another, right? And it can impact what we do, our decisions about our resources, our priorities, our actions, our commitments. So I think it's just about staying tuned in. People have said to me many times, that I was so strong. Oh my goodness, you must be so strong, because I could never survive if God took one of my children home. And they do say it's a very big loss. People say loss, and I remember I don't really use that word loss. But in any case, people said I was strong. I never felt that. Never. That, to me, that is totally not true, not accurate, because in a heartbeat, I'd choose to have my sons beside me today, now, with all I know. But what the strength comes to me with in our togetherness. And that's not just togetherness with those that I, sitting across the dinner table, or, those that I'm sharing this life experience with. It's together with all of our loved ones, with all who've gone before us, with everyone in heaven, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents. We need one another, and I think that's God's intent, and to reassure each other, to pray, to laugh, to cry, to uplift each other, to love and be loved. And it's on a practical plane, it's a reason to keep going, to get up the next day, to live your own life. A bereaved mother can want to spend the rest of their life just memorializing their child whose life seemed to be cut off, but we have our own calling and our own mission to fulfill, and we need to look at that and listen to that. So I told you that how was I going to share? Well, you kind of got the feel of how this unfolded, that I ended up putting together these portraits and created this rosary called Heaven's Rosarium. Rosarium is where the word rosary came from, means rose garden, so loved finding that word. And I did take it to schools and churches, and as soon as I listened to what was being said, how could I not want to do something with this? Here are some of the thoughts and some of the comments. When I look at those beautiful faces of Mary, I want to sing with deep and heartfelt gratitude. Gentle woman, kindest soul, so obedient and strong for all. Now that's the RCIA leader of the church that says this. Somebody else said, I was able to think of and relate to the human Mary, and that's the Rosary Altar Society president. I had, this one was interesting. This was a new and glorious morn. I was told, I shared with my students. Now, this is the chair of the philosophy department of a university in Nigeria. And this gentleman says, I shared with my students. They were strengthened, but the more I shared, the more strengthened I became. And so this is like a channel, right? A second grader said, I felt like I was with Mary. Well, oh my goodness, how could I not want to, provide that for all second graders? There was a fourth grader that said, the pictures of Mary reminded me of the beauty of heaven. God was there. Now we think about what is on our fourth graders' minds. And the fact that came to him. Now, here's what it really did it. The teenagers. Mary is now a big inspiration to me. Another teen. I got to see her not just as the mother of Jesus, but the mother of all of us. I thought of when I feel sad, how Mary will hear me pray. Another teen. I felt special because I can get called to be one of God's helpers. Oh, my goodness. And then here's the one that really gets to me. This created in me a feeling of love. And I think about this day and age, what our teenagers, the images they have of love, and the fact that this is in this child's mind, I didn't have a choice. I had to keep sharing this. And so I just want to say, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a blessing it is to pass this along and to be able to make a difference to anyone with the gifts that I have so fortunately received. And I think that's part of the plan. That's part of God's plan. I do want to say, years ago, I heard Father Michael Himes. He's a theologian, and I forget where he's teaching now, but I think he's at Boston College. But anyways, he had presented to the directors of religious ed and some Catholic school teachers, where are we at as Catholics? Where have we been and where are we going? And he said, he boiled it down. I love his ability to do this. He boiled it down to just a couple words. He said, Catholic means universal. God is universally present. He is part of everything, everywhere, every time, every experience, every place, every person, everything. Now, Father Hines, if you're listening, I hope I'm saying this right, but this is how it came across to me. He said, we have one calling as Catholics, to behold that, to notice it, and to share. And so the great blessing to share, and because certainly many have shared with me.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. So amazing. Yeah. So thank you, Barb, for all of your insights. I'm just going to recap a couple of things here, and then I'm just going to invite you to offer anything else that maybe has stirred in your mind or heart during the course of the interview, just anything else that you would like to share. But, yeah, I just want to recap a couple of the highlights that Barb shared with us through this episode. So obviously a very strong and powerful faith journey. She mentioned just at the beginning, and with the introduction, just that every person can be a student, every person can be a teacher. It doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your intelligence. You can learn from other people and teach other people by your example. She talked about the power of the liturgy at an early age. She talked about the power of the prayer of St. Francis and understanding the many lines in that prayer, and also how she then incorporated many lines from the various Marian prayers into her work. So she talked about with the prayer of St. Francis, where there's injury being a source of pardon, where there's doubt being a source of faith. Understanding that all of us as Catholics have a role and voice in the church. Understanding that our prayer sometimes is larger than just words. Sometimes there's, like Paul would say in his letter, about these groanings of the Spirit, that the Spirit prays on our behalf with us. She talked about how grief was matched by her love, and that those two elements of our experience go together. The more we love, the more we can grieve. And love is what really propels us to mourn when we lose something, and just the power of love. She talked about the connections that were established between her and her children in heaven. She talked about God's ways being greater than ours, and God's promises that he will prepare a place for us in his kingdom. Towards the last part about her surrendering in her faith experience, she talked about the meaning of life as always rooted in God, because everything in here in this day and this age is fleeting. Everything that we experience is not going to last forever. And so it's always important for us to keep our minds and our hearts fixed on God. As Paul writes in the letter to the Colossians, just seek what is above. Seek those things that are above. And she continued just mentioning that powerful connection she established with Mary, a calling for all Catholics and all Christians to understand just the role that Mary plays in our life, and the power of the Memorare, the power of the Hail Mary, understanding that she offers us mercy, that she offers us peace, that she offers us comfort in our affliction. She talked about the meaning of vocation and goal, about a moment-by-moment, day-to-day process of asking the Lord for guidance. Certainly, an attitude that puts us in the spirit of prayer at all moments, even in the ordinary things that we experience in our daily lives. Again, she continued to discuss the value of Mary's example, understanding her sorrow and her danger and fear, and understanding that she had a love that was stronger than death. And then finally, she talked about evangelization here. She talked about the power of following a vocation, the power of being together, and the power of sharing the Word of God, and also choosing to embrace vocation for the sake of evangelization, for the sake of the universality of the church, for bringing people into the fold, for beholding the beauty of ourselves as creatures of God, understanding that God is our Father, understanding that God gives us what we need, and that sometimes His ways are not our ways. So there's so much to pray with from Barb's story of her experience of life, her faith journey, her understanding. The family dynamics are so powerful and so prominent in her story too, just how important the family can be to us today. And so, Barb, I just want to offer you any final thoughts or any final reflections that you have as you've been so generous in sharing your story and your insights with us today.
Well, thanks so very much. Well, I think one big message that I love the opportunity to share is that when our loved ones leave the world, it doesn't mean I don't have a brother anymore, I don't have a sister anymore. Our relationship, because of our own spirit, our relationship continues to grow because love always grows. And when God reminds us that this is not only one of the three greatest gifts, but it is the greatest gift. This is of God. And as soon as we start to even try to imagine all that God is and has prepared for our life, it's awesome. It's beyond us. It's our hope. It's everything. And I think as we get older and we see that the world is more and more limited, we are like strangers in a strange land. Sometimes we start to see that maybe there's part of us that doesn't fit in this limited world. That is good news, because what God has prepared for us is so much greater. No eye has seen nor ear heard what God has prepared for those who love Him. And the opportunity to realize this, the opportunity to share it and talk about it is just pure joy. And I love that word, because joy encompasses sorrow. Joy is bigger than happiness, because it says that, yes, sorrow is still here, but there's more. And when I share this, when I have this opportunity to teach, but also to be taught, I see us as instruments of peace, which goes back to that prayer of St. Francis. Oh, I just love it. And so the one last thing that I'm so excited to share is that in the course of preparing for the interview, I took a little time after I put my notes on paper of what I wanted to share. And that I took some time to get to know the radio station better and to look at all these programs. And oh my heavens, there are so many topics that parallel my experience, my need and desire to share, and really what is a part of all of our faith journeys as Catholics, and the opportunity to help each other, just prepare the way, and to keep doing God's work and following our call. And I honestly can't wait to take advantage of learning more through this wonderful station, this wonderful channel of reaching out to others. So I thank you, Michael. I thank Dr. Sebastian, who introduced us, and all the people that have made it possible for me to keep sharing.
Sure. My pleasure. Yeah, thank you as well again, Barb. So as we wrap up today, I just want to remind everybody about Barb's video that is available on YouTube. So it's called A New and Glorious Morn. She mentioned this earlier. So the title of the video, if you search in YouTube, it would be Blessed Mother Mary, A New Glorious Morn. And this is part of the channel called Blessed Madonna. So if you'd like to subscribe to the channel Blessed Madonna, you can also find it there. Again, the title of the video is Blessed Mother Mary, a new glorious morn. And just like Barb was saying, it's O Holy Night with a slideshow of all of these images of Mary and these prayers, these phrases from the various Marian prayers. Just a beautiful, powerful video. And she shared some of the testimonies from people all over the world and their reactions to this video. So I invite you to check that out. And as we wrap up today, I just want to say a final thank you to all of our listeners and those who have continued to support us. Again, this is an episode of the Word of Mouth podcast. Our guest today was Barb Powers Harris. You can access this episode and all the episodes of the Word of Mouth podcast at WCATradio.com, and you can also find us at Spreaker.com if you search for Word of Mouth and the option that's based on society and culture. So thank you so much again. May God continue to bless you and your families, and we pray for you that the church might be strengthened during this very difficult time for all of us. So Barb, thank you so much for your time, and we will sign off today. Have a blessed day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
Thank you for listening to a production of WCAT Radio. Please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.